In this video I'm back at Ferrybridge on Chesil, but this time I'm fishing a landing craft mark. I've not had an awful lot of success here before, probably not timing my visits properly. However, it can be good for both bream and triggerfish if you get it right. So I'm using my beefed up bream rigs with both ragworm and squid. At some point I'll be having a go for mackerel, but they've been rather difficult to catch here recently. They seem to have been showing in better numbers at Abbotsbury and West Bexington. Having had a first cast, I'm swapping my lead over from a pyramid lead to one with wires. When the tide is pulling significantly, I allow one rig to drift, but I want the other one fixed in place so my lines don't cross. I'm tipping my ragworm baits with small bits of squid, so I'm cutting a squid up in preparation for that. My 2-hook rig has size 4 Kamasan B983s, which are Chinook-like, and are my favourite hooks for larger size black bream. My other rig has the same hooks, but 2 size 6s and a size 8. These might be considered small, but they can still handle decent sized fish. You just can't bully them out as much as you would with larger hooks. I'm just hoping that if there are any triggerfish around, they will fall to this rig. Triggerfish can put up quite a decent fight and are easily lost in the gutter if you don't play them right. With the onshore wind, I'm having to punch my rig more when I'm casting. My rods are held up quite high and I haven't aligned them parallel to the shoreline. I've still got them set at an angle, but not as much as I would if I was fishing for flatfish. Although it is quite windy and there is a bit of tidal pull, it's not enough to warrant me using a bag of stones to weigh down my tripod. However, if it does get windier and the tidal pull gets stronger, I'll probably end up having to do that. As you can see, the weather conditions are quite poor for filming. It's very humid and the sea mist has got quite a lot of salt in it. Coupled with a spray from the onshore breeze, that moisture is getting onto everything. Normally you'll be able to see Portland behind me, but that's totally obscured. I'll make my apologies now because later in the session conditions worsened. I was having to frequently stop to clean the lenses of my cameras, but they were misting up with moisture and salt depositing on the surface. The sun was trying to break through the sea mist, but didn't manage to do so all day. Quick pan round the area and look at the gear. The shingle bank is pretty steep here. It was energy sapping walking to where I'm fishing, even though the car park is directly behind that shingle. There are plenty of anglers fishing to my right, but none to my left. Most are spinning or feathering for mackerel. Here are the 2 rigs I'm using, with a 3-hook version attached to a continental lead. The rod on the ground is my Comic Arcadia and is the one I use for feathering. As I'm about to cast, I'll run through the locational details, first identifying some of the fishing areas along the whole stretch of Chesil and homing in on Ferrybridge itself, which is at the Portland end. The mark I'm fishing is accessed by the parking at Chesil Centre. The bridge itself at Ferrybridge separates a fleet from Portland Harbour. A lot of sea anglers would be familiar with the marks at Chesil Centre. You've got the Bird Sanctuary, the Royal Adelaide and the landing craft. You just park at the end of the car park and walk directly across to fish where I'm fishing for this video. tide of pull is running from my right to my left, which is why I've walked to my right a little bit before I cast. I'm already getting little knocks on the rod that I cast out first. Unless I hit the bite straight away, I won't wind in, but leave the rig there in place. The bream will usually have another go, and there's always another chance of hitting one. After a while of not being able to hit a bite, it got a bit frustrating, so I'm opting to use another rig for that. This short snood tube boom rig is the one I use if I can't hit bites. It's got size 12 hooks to 8 pound fluorocarbon, and scaling down your baits as well gives you a good chance of hitting those small bites. I find it a lot more convenient to store them on flat foam winders. I'm using small sections of ragworm and tiny bits of squid. My rig is now baited up and ready to go out. However, I could have done with smaller sized ragworm. The wind is not letting up and a little bit of weed is now coming onto the line, but nothing to worry about. What's concerning me more is the amount of salt spray coming over. I'm having to swap my glasses over and clean them up. Time to swap the rigs over. Having cast out a new rig, on tightening up, I get knocked straight away. So, scaling down has worked, and I have got my first fish. It is a pretty small black bream. So the tiny knocks are probably due to hordes of these fish around. A quick close-up of a successful rig. Salt sprays got worse, forcing me now to fish without glasses on. Unfortunately, I can't do much about the camera lens, cleaning it when I can, but as you can see, it is still crusting over. Twitching the baits are always a good idea when fishing for bream. I get a slightly bigger knock on my right hand rod and I'm now into a fish, and it feels quite decent. I get a couple of strong lunges and I'm now thinking this is not a bream. Well, that's a result. That's a decent triggerfish. It's very lightly hooked and a hook pulls out as I'm trying to lift it. What a lovely and strange looking fish. And this is why it's called a triggerfish. Since the triggerfish are about don't really want to try playing one on my tube boom rig, so I'm changing it over back to that free hook clip down rig. The mist has thickened and my gear and clothing are getting moist, but that's not really bothering me. I've caught my first triggerfish for a few years and I'm happy with that. I've never had more than one in a session and I'm hoping my luck's going to change, so I'm going to stick it out despite the conditions. The triggerfish was caught on squid, which I've tightly elasticated onto my hooks. A bite on my free hook rig and I'm into another decent fish. Even stronger lunges would suggest it's bigger than the one before. With size 6 and size 8 hooks, I've got to be a bit careful playing it. I've got to be most careful when a fish approaches a gutter. I'm going to have to beach the fish, so I've got to time that properly as the wave's coming towards me. Well pleased with that. It is bigger than the one before, and although I haven't got any scales with me, it does look like my PB. The dirty camera lens doesn't give it justice. It's got quite a fat belly, and it's got another angler's hook in its mouth, so it has been hooked before. My hook is just in the scissors of its mouth. What a gorgeous fish, with a huge fan tail. Another bite on a free hook rig. Surely that can't be another trigger. It's not a trigger, but a better sized black bream. Back to the little taps and smaller bream. As well as the salt spray, there's now a little bit of drizzle, and that's making it even harder to film. Another decent fish on a free hook rig. I can't believe it. It is another trigger, but not as big as the previous two, and I'm able to swing this one in. Although it's not mega rough, I don't want to get too close to the water's edge to return the fish. That's another good bite. and that's triggerfish number 4. My 5th and final triggerfish. What a terrific session. Although conditions made it very difficult to film, the fishing more than made up for that, and once again Chesil produced the goods to show that it's one of UK's best venues. The eel and pouting were caught just before I was packing away, but obviously it's the first 2 triggerfish that made the day.